Tonight, an adoptive father of 9 boys is in jail, charged with horrific crimes. He is accused of abusing one of those boys, who called into a podcast trying to get help.
January 30th. A terrified boy calls into a podcast and reveals the truth behind his family's viral fame. The man the internet knew as a loving father wasn't who he claimed to be. He had been sexually abusing him and his brothers for years. These are TikTokers getting exposed as predators. August 2020. It started with a screen recording and spiraled into one of the biggest scandals TikTok had seen. At the time, Tony Lopez was everywhere, with over 22 million followers, a signature smirk, and a coveted spot in the Hype House, TikTok's version of a boy band mansion, where a group of viral creators lived under one roof in LA, coming up with dances, trends, and collabs nonstop. So basically, Tony Lopez wasn't just an influencer. He was the influencer. He had millions of fans, billions of views, and a career that looked bulletproof. But that summer, allegations began to surface. Allegations that would crack that image wide open, spark a lawsuit, and shift the conversation about fame, power, and the limits of accountability online. It began when a fellow TikTok user posted messages from an underage girl who claimed Lopez had sent her inappropriate content and requests through Snapchat. According to her, he never once asked her age. Shortly after, another girl comes forward with similar claims. Their conversations allegedly begin on Instagram before moving on to Snapchat, where the content becomes a little more explicit. And again, she said he didn't ask how old she was. Then came Izzy.
So this is my best friend Izzy's account on Instagram. Tony, as you see right there, Tony Lopez. You can look at the username and profile pictures.
In a TikTok video, she and one of her friends shared screenshots of Izzy's own messages with Lopez. Messages where he called her things like "so fine" and "yum." She made it clear that she was a minor at the time of those conversations, even holding up her ID in the video as proof. But at the end of the video, she would say,
"We ain't trying to romanticize a file. We're here to warn people."
As more girls came forward with their own screenshots and testimonies, the story spread fast and far. Early 2021, 2 girls finally filed an official civil lawsuit against Lopez, accusing him of inappropriate conduct and emotional distress. The lawsuit detailed interactions where Lopez allegedly knew the girls were minors but still pursued them, both online and in person. One girl said they met back in January 2020, and their relationship became physical before she admitted she was actually underage. The other would allege Lopez not only knew she was a minor, but openly acknowledged it and still continued sending inappropriate messages and pressuring her to meet up. The case quickly catches attention on national media. While no criminal charges were filed, the lawsuit alone sent a clear message. Your actions online can have real-world consequences. And by 2023, the case ended in a confidential settlement. The law firm representing the girls called it a step toward accountability, emphasizing the importance of giving survivors space to be heard. However, that wasn't the end for Lopez. As the story gained traction, people began revisiting Tony's digital footprint, and what they found raised even more questions. Old tweets started resurfacing, adding yet another layer to an already unfolding controversy. The old tweets, some from years ago, others more recent, would contain offensive language, racial stereotypes, and hurtful remarks about women and the LGBTQ+ community. Also, during the height of Black Lives Matter's protesting, one tweet suggested protesters were giving people a reason to stay racist, which drew heavy backlash. In other tweets, Lopez appeared to fetishize women based on their race, something many found deeply inappropriate, especially given the other allegations already surrounding him. Now, Lopez responded by calling these old childish tweets and said he no longer stood by what he wrote. But many noted that some of the posts were only a year or two old, raising questions about what had really changed. Tony Lopez has denied several more serious allegations, calling them false and claiming that they're attempts to damage his reputation. No criminal charges have been brought against him, but the public fallout, the civil lawsuits, and the stories shared by multiple girls painted a troubling picture. And whether or not he does face further legal consequences, his career has already taken a serious hit that he hasn't recovered from to this day. The internet doesn't forget, and in this case, it held one of TikTok's biggest stars under a microscope he couldn't dance his way out of.
Girls really look for in a guy. You don't have to be funny. Hell, you don't even have to be really that good looking. What they really want is they want a Batman in the streets.
At first glance, Buddy Haynes, better known as the Buddy on TikTok, just looked like another cringy internet guy. He's older than usual creators on this app, often lip-syncing to emo songs or making exaggerated over-the-top facial expressions, and for a while people kind of treated him like a meme, someone to laugh at and not take seriously. But then the messages started surfacing, and things take a much darker turn. It all started when an 18-year-old TikTok user named Liz, who'd been running an Instagram account exposing creepy TikToks, shared one of Buddy's videos. Now, she didn't think much of it, just another unsettling clip of an older guy making younger users feel uncomfortable. But when one of Liz's followers messaged her, saying,
Hey, I'm 14. Want me to see if he's actually creepy?
Now at first the conversation was casual. They would talk about cosplay, but then the tone shifted. According to the girl, once she mentioned her age, Haynes didn't back off. Instead, he kept messaging her, telling her she was attractive, saying he wished they could date. He sent dozens of videos, some shirtless, some with him biting his lips or kissing the camera. Now the girl kept these messages. She didn't delete anything. And eventually she would share everything with Liz. And that's when things exploded. Liz posted the messages and videos, and then a YouTuber named Bionic Pig made a full expose titled, "This TikTok star is taking advantage of children, the Buddy." The video gets over 1 million views. Suddenly everyone's talking about Haynes, not as a meme, but as someone targeting minors. The Buddy tries defending himself, saying he didn't realize how old she was. But he also admitted that the conversation happened and that he had been contacted by both local police and the FBI afterward. So in this interview with BuzzFeed News, Haynes said federal agents showed up at his home and they would ask him about these messages, about his internet history, and about who he was talking to online. He said they suggested he step back from TikTok for a while, maybe even take a break. That break turned permanent. Although TikTok never publicly commented on this situation at the time, Haynes eventually found himself locked out of his account. When he tried to come back a few weeks later, the platform had banned him. A TikTok spokesperson later confirmed the ban, stating that his account violated the app's community guidelines. Haynes was banned, but the larger issue didn't go away. The Buddy story became a symbol of something bigger. How TikTok's algorithm can unintentionally put underage users in the path of predatory behavior. The way the app learns your interests and feeds you endless content makes it easier than ever for bad actors to find vulnerable targets, especially when they're looking for specific hashtags, trends, or age groups. Now Liz, the woman who exposed Haynes, put it this way.
If a guy keeps liking videos of young girls, the app will keep showing them more.
That's just how the algorithm works. And because TikTok's moderation is a mix of AI filters and a small army of human reviewers, many harmful interactions can slip through the cracks before they're actually flagged, if they get flagged at all. So as trust in platform safety is dropping, a kind of digital self-defense community is being formed. Women, adult and minor, began sharing and collecting evidence of inappropriate behavior. They posted call-out videos, ran Instagram pages, and kept tabs on users who made them feel unsafe. It was messy, unregulated, and sometimes flawed. But for many, it's the only line of defense they felt they had. And well, in Haynes' case, it really worked. But it also raised tough questions. Like, what happens when users feel they have to police the platform themselves? And what happens to the people who don't get caught?
A recent case of a trans TikTok star who turned out to be a predatory pedophile who had repeatedly abused 2 young children.
May 2021, a TikTok account under the name Rachel.Queen8008 was blowing up. In a now viral video, a middle-aged trans woman dances confidently to a trending sound, smiling into the camera, radiating what many saw as joy and self-expression. The caption read,
"Living my best life. #proud trans woman."
Within days, her follower count shot past 36,000, with comments pouring in calling her inspiring, brave, and authentic. But dear God, if they only knew the truth. You see, behind these polished videos and carefully curated hashtags was Rachel Queen Burton, a convicted child abuser who had spent years grooming, manipulating, and violating minors while stalking their family across rural South Australia. Her online persona was a lie, and her sudden rise in TikTok stardom came just after her laptop had been seized by the Joint Anti-Child Exploitation Team. I mean, she was so audacious that by the time that dancing video went viral, Burton had already been under investigation. And her history wasn't just disturbing, it was downright horrifying. You see, before she was Rachel to the world, she was Richard to Helen and her kids. A man they once trusted, and a man Helen thought was good for her kids. Back in 2019, Helen's family lived in a quiet corner of regional South Australia. They had no idea that someone so close to them was slowly tearing their world apart. Now, Burton wasn't just manipulative. She was calculating. She worked her way into the family's trust and then, behind closed doors, committed some of the most vile acts imaginable. She abused two of Helen's kids, leaving behind scars so deep they still face nightmares because of it. At first, Helen didn't see it. She would see these small red flags like subtle shifts in behavior, growing distance between her and her kids, and she only realized later on that Burton was actually isolating them and whispering that poison into their ears. Burton was telling them that their mother was
the ruination of fun,
and tried to sever the bond between them. And somehow it was working. When Helen finally breaks away and takes her kids to escape this, she thought they were safe, but Burton followed. She demanded her laptop back along with 2 external hard drives, insisting they were personal. But something about how desperate she was for it didn't sit right. So Helen checked it, and what she found on that laptop changed everything. Here we had hidden within folders images of her own kids, evidence of the abuse that had been happening under her nose. As a mother, she described it like seeing the tip of the knife and then the whole blade. Getting help wasn't easy. Helen tried turning to local services, but the system failed her over and over again. She was told to just be patient, told to wait, and told that the allegations weren't clear. But her kids were terrified. They couldn't sleep. They were jumpy, anxious, always looking over their shoulders. This wasn't just trauma. It was real-time fear that this person who hurt them might still be watching. Eventually, a Catholic church organization steps in and connects Helen with JSET, the Joint Anti-Child Exploitation Team. And they didn't waste time. They took the devices, launched an investigation, and for the first time in years, Helen felt like someone was actually listening. But then came TikTok. About 6 months into this investigation, Burton reemerges online. But this time, not as the man Helen knew. She's now presenting herself as Rachel Queen Burton, a bubbly, confident trans woman, gaining clout fast. Her videos are lighthearted, even charming sometimes. She would dance, laugh, and speak about empowerment. And the internet ate that shit up. I mean, the public really thought she was a brave trans creator. But in reality, to Helen and her kids, she's a monster playing dress-up. Helen said,
"It felt like he was everywhere, because that's how he made it feel."
Imagine fleeing your abuser, living in safe houses, hiding, constantly moving, and then opening your phone to see their face go viral. That's the kind of psychological torment Burton inflicted, long after that physical abuse had ended. In 2022, authorities finally caught up. Burton was arrested and charged with multiple abuse offenses, including producing and possessing exploitation material, gross indecency, and indecent assault. She initially denied everything, then eventually pled guilty. But during the court proceedings, Helen and her kids delivered gut-wrenching victim impact statements. The youngest would describe feeling like a bird trapped in a cage. Her son said he still couldn't sleep because of the nightmares. Even the oldest, who hadn't directly been abused, spoke of the trauma that haunted the entire family. The stalking, the homelessness, and the fear. Meanwhile, Burton, sitting in a male prison, appeared by video link. She would weep during the hearing, but Helen wasn't convinced. She said,
You showed no remorse online. Getting an audience for your false life was far more important.
To make matters worse, Burton's own words from jail painted an even more disturbing picture. In recorded prison calls, she would talk about becoming famous again once she got out. She said,
I'm still the queen. My name will be loud.
She planned to get out, go to the media, and tell her side of the story. But that craving for attention, that ego, the manipulation, it didn't do her any favors in court. In the end, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. However, the victims here felt the court was too lenient. Helen called that sentence a booby prize, saying that her children still live in fear and they worry that Burton will one day come back because in their eyes, she never really left.
How do you think guys should pick up girls in Singapore?
Exactly what I said. What do you think? Bring a dog.
Welcome to March 21st, 2025. In a courtroom in Singapore, Lev Panfilov sits in silence as the verdict was delivered. He had his head down, dressed in a purple prison jumpsuit, eyes flicking toward the public gallery where a few of his relatives sat. A high court judge has just found him guilty of rape, sexual assault by penetration, and outrage of modesty. Now, just a few years ago, Panfilov was best known online either for his work as a scriptwriter with Wah Banana, a popular local YouTube comedy channel, or for the quirky content he posted on TikTok. But behind the sketches and punchlines was a very different story, one that started with a Tinder message and ended in a criminal conviction. January 2021, Panfilov had matched with a woman on Tinder. She was 30, an actress and model, trying to break it into the comedy writing scene. He was 24, a scriptwriter and a former face on Wah Banana, the kind of name that gave him credibility in the local content scene. So his profile made him seem smart, funny, and connected. Exactly the kind of person she hoped could offer insight or even a foot in the door. They chatted, then moved to WhatsApp, and eventually they decided to meet in person. So they meet at a Wine Connection restaurant in Robertson Cay. She brings her laptop and notes, ready to work, to talk about ideas, maybe build a connection that could help her career. And for a while, that's exactly what it all looked like. They would brainstorm, watch comedy sketches, and toss around ideas for characters and scenes. But as closing time came and the staff signaled last orders, Panfilov suggested they continued at his flat. She agreed. It didn't seem strange. After all, they were working. And for someone in the industry, collaborations often happen over coffee tables, living rooms, and late-night writing sessions. So this didn't really feel like a red flag. Now at the flat, he led her to his room. He said it was the only space clear enough to work in. So they sit on his bed, and they pull up some comedy clips. She thought they were still talking about writing, but he leans in and kisses her. She pulls away, says no. And that should have been the end of it right there, right? But instead, it's just the beginning. What happened next would be very traumatic. Now, she said he sexually assaulted her and then raped her on his bed, ignoring her attempts to stop it. And when it was over, he called her a ride home. Now, she gave him her address and later explained it was because she just wanted to get out of there and would have said yes to anything if it meant she could leave. In the days that followed, she tries to pretend like nothing had happened. But of course, the pain would linger on, physically, emotionally, like she's just floating outside of her body, reliving that moment over and over again. And yet she doesn't tell anyone, not her mother, not her sister, not even the police. She's too afraid that no one's going to believe her, because there were no witnesses, and because she had gone to his house, given her address, and because she thought that when stories like these happen behind closed doors, they often end in disbelief. So this pain wouldn't just go away by itself, and she eventually goes to see a doctor who examined her and urged her then to make a police report. She left the clinic and walked into a neighborhood police station later that same day. She speaks with a few officers, but ultimately, she walks out without filing a report. It was too much. She felt exposed and vulnerable, like she had to defend every move she made.
Why did you go out with him? Why didn't you leave sooner? Why did you wait so long to come here?
But 2 days later, just after midnight on January 18th, she finally breaks down and tells her mother everything. This time there was no turning back. Her mother takes her to the Double K Women's and Children's Hospital, and a police report is filed that day. The case goes to trial 2 years later, and this poor woman's resilience had to be tested all over again. She is cross-examined for 13 days straight. 13. The prosecution called it unprecedented. Every detail of her account was picked apart. Her actions, her words, her delays in reporting. But through it all, she held firm. The judge later said that her testimony was unusually convincing, detailed, consistent, and deeply human. Now, Panfilov, on the other hand, gave a very different version of events. He claimed the encounter was consensual, that she had laughed at all his jokes, touched his leg, and initiated everything. But this wasn't a sketch, not a role, or even a play he could rewrite. And when it came down to it, nobody believed him. March 21st, 2025, the verdict is handed down. Guilty. Lev Panfilov was convicted on all charges. We'll find out about the sentence in the upcoming months. But the verdict itself was a big step forward. Not just for one poor victim, but for any others out there who might still be scared to speak.
Don't say thank you. Say I appreciate it. Don't say you're welcome. Say my pleasure.
November 2023, a body is found near Port Said, Egypt. Mutilated, strangled, dumped like trash in the desert. Her name wasn't known yet, and the brutality is unmistakable. She'd been tortured, sexually assaulted, and murdered. Police didn't think this was an isolated case, and they were right. In the weeks that followed, 3 more women turned up dead in remote desert locations. Different places, but the same pattern, the same brutality, the same method. It didn't take long before it was clear. Egypt had a serial killer on its hands. But no one expected who it would be. He wasn't just some recluse hiding out in the shadows. This guy turned out to be a man named Karim Selim, a respected academic, a popular TikToker, and a father. Someone who seemed, at least on the surface, like he had it all together. We go back to 1987. Born in Alexandria, Karim had everything: privilege, education, a polished image. He gets his PhD in psychology in the US before returning to Egypt in 2017 with his wife and son, Zayn. He owned a tattoo studio, taught English at a reputable international school, and would film TikTok videos. He would even preach about parenting. His followers, over 600,000 of them, knew him as an intellectual with charisma and a gentle voice. The kind of man who gave advice. But behind that closed door, there was a different Karim. After his marriage fell apart and his drug use worsened, this guy spiraled. He became volatile, paranoid, and violent. His wife, Labna Yakut, left him in 2020 and went back to the States. But he kept Zayn, and that's when things got even darker. He turns his upscale New Cairo apartment into a trap, one with rooms that are soundproofed, equipped with chains, wires, whips, and hidden cameras. This was where he lured his victims. This is where he tortured and killed. Now, some of his victims, mostly sex workers, were drugged, brutalized, and murdered while his son was in the same home. And for months, police had no suspects, no solid leads. And then in May 2024, everything changed. Investigators trace a rented SUV, registered under Karim's name, to remote sites where the victims' bodies had been dumped. And just like that, the mask started to slip. So when they raided his house, they find themselves face to face with a mountain of evidence. Oh, they didn't just find equipment, but the footage. This sick guy filmed the torture and abuse of each of his victims. And not only that, but investigators would learn that Karim had sold some of those videos on the dark web. So now, faced with this evidence, Karim confessed. He admitted to luring women through social media, drugging them, and murdering them. When asked how many, he couldn't give a number. Authorities believe the actual body count could be as high as 30. At his trial, prosecutors laid it all out. The murders were not random nor impulsive. These were methodical, calculated, and deeply disturbing. Each woman had been lured into his apartment. Each one had been drugged and sexually assaulted, before and after death. There are video files, surveillance footage, phone records, forensic evidence, and Karim's own confession. The timeline matched the locations, and so did his DNA. And the court didn't hold back. September 12, 2024, after a swift trial, Karim Salim was sentenced to death by hanging. And to the public, the verdict would be a mix of justice and horror. A reminder of how easily someone can hide behind charm, intelligence, and a very polished image.
And together we are the Coens, and this is our unique family vlog.
January 16th, 2017. A man named Haim Nassim Cohen uploads his first video on YouTube. Now in it, he introduces his 9 adopted sons to the world. The channel is called Our Unique Family, and it doesn't take long to live up to that name. Within months, Haim and the boys had grown a sizable following across YouTube and TikTok. Their content was pretty wholesome, sometimes silly, but always heartfelt. Viewers tuned in to watch an ultra-Orthodox Jewish family cook traditional meals, dance to Jewish music, celebrate birthdays, and even respond to anti-Semitism online. People saw this home filled with love, culture, and purpose. A family that looked different but clearly cared for one another. And that's because for years, Haim had perfectly crafted an image of a single Hasidic father raising his 9 Jewish boys. He would appear in interviews as a selfless parent, speaking about homeschooling and promoting messages about kindness and community. Media outlets praised him. People donated money to help support the boys. And he even received a certificate of appreciation from Child Protective Services. But man, no one knew the truth until January 30th, 2023. On this night, one of Haim's sons called into a podcast. The episode is hosted by Twaya Paines on her YouTube channel, Blind Skinned Beauty. The boy's voice trembled as he told listeners that he and his brothers had been enduring sexual abuse from their adoptive father for years.
Do he normally come in and just get right to you and
he makes
want
us go and sit
do mean stuff
in
to
his
you?
room, and we watch TV, and then it happens.
Oh, he was scared and waiting until his 18th birthday to go to the police. He feared that they wouldn't believe him, and he also revealed that CPS had already conducted 8 separate investigations into the family, and nothing had come of them. Each time the boys had defended their father, not out of loyalty, but out of fear.
Now, the problem here is it's essentially my word versus all of my brothers.
He said that Haim would punish them with pepper spray, lock them in their rooms for most of the day, deprive them of food, and worse. Like, if they didn't obey him, he would force them to perform sexual acts on each other. You see, on one point in the episode, the boy goes silent, and when he returns, he whispers that his father had just called him, and he's on his way home. It was clear how much danger he was actually in. The podcast host immediately reports this call to the police. They're able to trace the boy's IP address back to Haim's house. Less than 2 weeks later, on February 10th, 2023, Haim Nassim Cohen's arrested, and from there, his mask starts to fall. 6 of the 9 boys come forward with similar allegations. A foreign exchange student who had briefly lived with that family also testified that Haim had sexually abused him. Investigators found that the boys had been kept in isolation, medicated without cause, and denied a proper education. Some were cut with knives, others were beaten, and one child had run away at some point, only to be returned by the police because Haim had lied to him, telling him that the boy was suffering from mental health issues. This sick man was charged with 8 offenses, including injury to a child, aggravated sexual assault, and continuous sexual abuse of a minor. Eventually, he pled guilty to 4 counts of continuous sexual abuse and 1 count of indecency with a child. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, not to be eligible for parole. The boys had their day in court. One by one, they stood before the man who had pretended to be their father and told him exactly what he'd taken from him. They called him Jeffrey, his birth name, the one he had hidden behind religion and rebranding. The boy who had made the podcast told him,
"You're a sick and twisted individual with an incurable disease. You preyed upon innocent boys who had nothing."
Another boy told him,
"You can't hurt me anymore."
He was proud to tell the court that he was doing better now, that he's learning to play the trombone, ride a skateboard, and he hoped that Haim would feel just as scared in prison as they had in his home. Another one admitted he tried to take his life 19 times, and then all 6 of them said the same thing in the end. Jeffrey Cohen would die in prison, and for the first time in a long time, they'd be free. In the end, this story was never about religion or family nor internet fame. It's about manipulation, control, and a man who thought he could use every tool he could find, faith, identity, sympathy, and social media, to hide what he really was. And boys who, after years of silence, found the courage to actually speak up. And that courage is what people should remember most.